web application firewall. So we saw how the firewall worked, what you can give in the rules, like the source, the destination, the port, the protocols, and then IDPS does its work. IDPS does a lot of intelligent work looking into the packet, but there is a whole use case of applications, right? So when we talk about applications, there are different types of attacks. There is like playing on the fields of the header or playing on the contents of the fields. For example, we are talking about SQL injection attack, cross-site scripting, where you use the fields to pass a command, right? To bypass a password, things like that, that now enables them to receive data, and them is people with malicious intent, hackers, which we don't want to access who we don't want to access our application. And that's very different than looking into the packet and looking at the source and destination. So there's a whole different types of attacks that happen when we look at web application firewall. One of the things we saw is HTTPS, how traffic is sent within. So for that, there is something called a web application firewall. So use case for that is one, like we said, everything is on the public IP. Threat landscape is not getting any better. But the important thing is you have too many applications. So you will fix, and that is not like an option you don't, but these application developers maintaining, updating, also need security knowledge on top of application knowledge. And all that takes time. Whenever there's a new attack, all that takes time. How to protect your application. After all doing all this patching and all, you go on to the next application, number of applications is large. So is there a way to bring all this intelligence up in one solution and protect all the applications? That's where web application firewall comes in. So that's one central place where you define all the, look for all the different types of attacks and block them before they reach the application. Doesn't mean you don't patch and update your applications, but you are constantly not protected if you're just doing that, and how to make it easy. And that's where web application firewall comes in. So on Azure, web application firewall integrates with the application load balancers, application gateway, and front door, because these are the load balancers that see the web application traffic. And that's where, so if you talk about front door, you get, it is a global solution with any CAS routing. It's able to drop all the TCP SYN, like layer 3, layer 4 attacks at the edge, and then a scale. So there is the whole protection from DDoS type of attacks. And then web application firewall enables protecting from malicious bots out there. I'm going to go a little bit fast just to keep sure we are on track. And given that we've covered the firewall, we'll focus on the web application firewall features. So you can integrate this web application firewall with front door or application gateway. Each of these have the ability to do IP restriction, filtering on, some strings in the URI or headers or size restrictions and so on. So you have that. So basically, it helps you protect against the OWASP top 10 attacks. There's a little bit difference between WAF WAF policy applied at the global front door and applied at the application gateway level. The one big difference is at the edge, you can do rate limiting. There's also a need to do rate limiting at the edge. So that helps you rate limit the traffic, versus application gateways more closer to your workloads. So now you can have more fine-tuned rules to your application. So those are a little bit of pros and cons. You can have both one after the other. If you are able to configure all rules for an application at the global WAF, you can also do that. Front door at a high level It is our global load balancing solution. So the scale is huge. It's very close to the user, so gives performance and lower latency, a huge improvement in performance and reduction in latency. So when you integrate your solution with front door, especially if you have global user base, this is the right solution to use. And then application gateways, it has a regional public IP. So all the traffic comes to the region where the application gateway is hosted. But that's all. That's where it is. That's the only regional part. Your backends can be any IPs it can reach within this VNet, within spoke VNets, within peered VNets, as long as the IP is reachable from on premises. And that's true for front door too. Sorry, I'm on front door still. Application gateway, it can both front door and application gateway can load balance on-prem. So front door needs public IP as the backend. Application gateway needs any reachable IP as the backend, right? So let me go back, sorry. These are the features that are available for Azure front door. You have managed rules, right? So you can have rules that are, like we saw with IDPS, that are already there. They're managed by Azure. So at the edge, they are called DRS, default rule sets. They are the OWASP top 10 rules, and on top of it, the intelligence from the Microsoft threat intelligence is also pulled in. So now it's much more richer set of rules that gives the protection to your applications at the edge. Deploying at the edge means you are dropping that offending traffic before it comes into the network and passes all the different solutions you have deployed. And that's the biggest benefit. You can also have custom rules. Now all the managed rules are running out of the box. Custom rules are when you say you want specific requirements based on the logs you see or based on the applications you have. You can configure those. So Azure Front Door has two SKUs. Premium SKU is the one that has full WAFs. Standard can only do custom rules. And then there's the ability to do rate limiting. The actions that it can do is block, allow, log, or redirect traffic. And we'll look at this when we do a demo. So while I'm going fast, it is covered in the demo. WAF with Application Gateway, it has the ability, like I said, to come more closer to the application and be more fine-tuned for it. There is two modes that, again, WAF runs in. You run in detection mode first always, where the traffic is logged, and then move it to prevention mode when you want to drop the traffic that is supposed to be dropped. The other difference with Application Gateway is Application Gateway will have multiple applications running in the backend. You are able to have policies at a global WAF level per site and per URI. And this is what I mean by that. An Application Gateway has listeners. Listeners is IP plus port for that application. And even underneath it, you can have different paths, different backends for different paths, right? You can apply the WAF at a global level or at a listener level or at the URI level. And that's the granularity that Application Gateway gives, because you can have different rules here versus here. That's it. So again, WAF also integrates with Sentinel. We saw how that works with Azure. Just like we looked for Azure Firewall, look for Azure Web Application Firewall Workbook, and it gives the same dashboard or same features with the information on the WAF policy that you're looking for. Pricing, again, there is a per gateway price. So Application Gateway can scale by itself. And now when we talk about WAF, we are talking about WAF policy and WAF configuration. So all the features we talked about are for WAF policy, and there are restricted features with WAF config. WAF config is something you configure directly on the on a specific application gateway. WAF policy is like we saw with firewall policy. You create a policy and apply it multiple places. So one place to make changes. But the other thing is it's also very restricted in WAF config what you can do, and it is less config. So the new way to do it is WAF policy. So new deployments use WAF policy, and WAF policy only works with application gateway version 2. So keep that in mind. Pricing, again, it is per gateway per hour. And then there is a capacity unit price. So again, similar to firewall. And the same thing, application gateway also scales with your traffic. I think features-wise, it was similar. So now let me just pull up a demo that I can show you the configurations that I can walk through, and we'll get a better understanding. So when we want to look for policy, yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, internal, did you have a question or is good?
No, just to make the page a little bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So when you go to Firewall Manager, this also manages WAF policies for you. So single pane of glass to manage all different policies. While it is different types of attacks, it is still attacks, right? Still your environment. So it makes it much easier to come here. You can create a new policy here. You can see existing policies. And I can just click on one. So as you see, I have one front door, one application gateway policy, but I will just click on this one policy and look at how it looks, right? And then see that it is associated with one of my front door endpoints. If I come in settings, I can configure policy settings. So these policy settings are at applied at a global level, right? So for all the requests that come in, these policy settings are applied. You choose whether you want to do request body inspection. There are rules where you want to redirect traffic. So if you have traffic coming this way, request coming this way, they need to be redirected to a URL. So we have configured a URL where redirect happens, and that happens based on the configuration here. And then whenever there is a rule that matches block, by default, there is a 403 error code send, but you can specify what code you want, and you can specify what response or description you want, what kind of page and error you want to display. So these are global applies to all policies. It will say here both custom and managed rules. Now, the power of the web application firewall, again, for me, it's the managed rules that give the benefit because I'm not going into searching for different types of attacks possible. It's taking care of it for me. So as you see here, there are two different types of rules that you can enable. There are bot manager rules. Again, this is with the WAF policy. And then there are good bots, bad bots, and unknown bots. So they are categorized that way. For example, search engine crawlers, maybe it is okay to allow them, but malicious bots, you will block them. So if you wanted to change this to block, you can, right? So it just gives you that additional level of information. And as you see here, there is a rule ID description action. You can change it. So for example, this one, you can change the action. So let me see if I have. So see here, if I don't have this selected, there's nothing. But when I select a particular signature, I can enable or disable the signature. I can change the action to just log or block. And then there are the default rule sets. These are managed by Microsoft, like we said, built for OWASP top 10, as well as the intelligence we get from threat intelligence. And then this also has the rule ID and then different actions. So even on front door, default rule set 2.0 and above have a block on anomaly. So this is where just because the request matched a rule, it may not automatically block it. There is different severities, and for each severity, there is a weight. So for example, critical is 5, error could be 4, warning, and so on. When that request matches a signature, let's say it gets a score of 2, then it's until it's a score of 5, it's not blocking it. So it keeps checking for more signatures until it hits another signature. Now it has a score of 3 plus 2, 5. That's when it will block. So it is a little anomaly, little block on anomaly detection. It's not just block, it will make sure it really needs to be blocked. So there's a little bit more intelligence there. But otherwise, they work similar to what we talked about. You enable them. Once they're enabled, these rules are checked, and traffic is blocked or logged as you identified. Excuse me. Now, custom rules are where you know for your environment, you need these rules. That's where you're going to add rules. When you add custom rules, they are always run before managed rules. So I'll take an example. This example says, this is a rule based on geo-filtering, where I have a match condition. If the geo address is matching North Korea, then I take an action of deny. Maybe this stemmed from the reason that I don't do business in North Korea. I don't have customers there, or I'm seeing a lot of traffic from North Korea, which I shouldn't be seeing. And that's how you can add a custom rule. That's why when you add a custom rule, those get executed before the managed rules. So we're going to walk through maybe one. So I have a rate limit request here such that I can have a rate limit rule and say within a 1 minute or 5 minute duration, I should not expect more than these many requests. So you can have 10,000, you can have whatever, but you set a threshold. If more requests than that come within the time period you mentioned, then the rest of the requests will be blocked, right? And then you give more details on if it matches a URI. For example, here I'm saying if it matches a search, then I take an action, then I deny traffic. Let's look at this particular rule. Here I have a match condition. Here I'm saying I'm looking at the request header, so that's the variable, and I'm looking for the header user agent in this request, and I want to see if it contains a string of this version, of this value. So if I see a string of this value, I want to do a redirection. And if you remember the policies, we had set a redirection URL, then it will redirect to that. So this is where you can look inside a string, look inside a header for a specific value, and then based on that, take an action. So I'm just going to try to demo this one feature, this one rule. So basically what this rule does is if I have a request that comes with from Firefox, I'm redirecting it, right? So let me see if I can give a URL or go anywhere, and I should have done F12. Oh, sorry, it's not a URL. This is for my particular application that is running. So this particular WAF policy is associated with my front door. And that's where I'm applying the WAF policy, right? So if I go to my front door, I want to see, and let me see if I can see in security policies, I see that there is this association of this policy here. So if I go to my front door manager, and then I just copy this endpoint, And then I want to see what happens if because my application is running behind it. Maybe this does not work very well. So I'm gonna want this request of redirection. So what I want to do here is run this URL. And if you see here, this redirected me to microsoft.com/edge. This is the redirect URL we had given, and that's how it got us here. I'm going to see if we can find that request here. And that's the challenge, finding the request. But if you look at this request, it would have shown me that I'm trying to look for the GET request here with my endpoint. And just because I'm a little bit rushed, I'm not going to find it. So, yeah, there you go. And so this is the URL that I put in. And if you remember the rules, we were looking for request header, and we were looking for the user agent, and very specific string that we were looking for is this version number. So when I found this, so when the WAF policy found it, it knew it had to redirect, and that's how the redirection happened. Okay. I hope that is clear. I want to give some time for questions before we move on. Others I would have done. Okay, actually, let me finish one more thing. So the same thing here with logs is what you want to what you want to do is allow the diagnostic logs here. And as you see here, you can go into metrics and have these metrics dashboard set up where I want to see how many requests are blocked and how many requests are redirected, and I can have a time range for that. And as you see here, I see block requests are 25. That was the other rule where I drop a request based on rate limiting. And then the redirect rule is what we recently ran, but then I have this splitting that shows me what kind of traffic ran when. And while these many requests were blocked, the total number of traffic was a lot more. So the legitimate traffic is still there and working, but this metrics dashboard gives you the ability to see that information. And as always, diagnostic settings, make sure you have a setting configured. I have 3 different types of logs options. For the WAF, it is this Web Application Firewall logs. And then send to log analytics if you want to see them in CM, but you have other options. You can send it to storage, you can send it to a partner solution, or even stream it if you want. So I think in the chat there was a question, how to send my logs. This is what you do. You enable the logs you want to capture, and then choose one of these 4 options. And with Event Hub, you can stream it to where you want. So choose one of these 4 options. For today, I'm using log analytics. And here is just one query that I have run that says, show me all the logs that have a redirect option, that have been redirected. So here is an example. I had run the same query before. It gives me information on what the URI was. What the rule name was, if you remember, the rule name was redirect Firefox user agent. And then the host and the policy that got triggered, our policy, WAF policy as front door premium, and the match that it made was on this pattern and the action that it took. So that's the details that you can find at any time for any of the different logs. And similar to firewall, so here is an example of traffic that was blocked. So there was a rate limit request, rate limit rule, right? So here is an example where the traffic was rate limited. It tells me, this is actually only for blocked. So here actually you see this is a default rule set, a managed rule that got blocked. This gives me the client IP from where the request came and then the action that it took. So you can go to the respective policies. In production, you may have multiple policies, and then go drill down into this and see who this client is. So that's what is there. And here is a view how it looks in log analytics and the workbook that I mentioned. So same information here, but it is more broken down at a glance. What are the top event triggers? What rules are being triggered? And the dashboard and the rules here. And you can always filter on a particular keyword, and then only those rules come up, and so on. Because it is very similar to firewall, I'm not going to repeat, but it just gives a very visual view of what's happening in your environment. So we did the front door, but this is the web application firewall. This is more like a real world environment. You see 1.3 million requests in the last 24 hours, and then the top blocked request URI. And here you can see these URIs and the amount of requests that come to each. So this is more colorful. Here is a more realistic view of the different types. As you see here, there are bots, there are user agents, so many different types of signatures being checked for. And you can always look at the logs. But the beauty is in this kind of workbook, it's very easy to do investigation. It's very easy to filter on a keyword and then see how to get the very important information surface, right? So you are able to get those insights.